Keep the grind up.
Hey, welcome everyone to the podcast Keep the Grind Up. This is your host Christian. Today we have a guest speaker. Our guest speaker and our first guest speaker on the video podcast, Brenda Z Kumisuku. She's an experienced Zambian-born information security professional with over 10 years of experience in both technology and cybersecurity, specializing in assessment, risk management, and building executive-level relationships. She's the founder and co-host of the Honeypot Chat podcast, aiming to simplify cybersecurity for the public, and a founding member of the Women in Technology Network and the Work with Courage Foundation. Passionate about mentorship and diversity, Brenda works to increase representation and opportunities for women and marginalized groups in STEM. Hi, Brenda. How are you doing?
Hey Christian, how are you doing? That's a mouthful though.
No, but I'm used to it. So it's great for
How
us
are
to
you
have you
doing?
on the podcast today and for you to know where, although it's the chat space of the podcast, you're the first guest speaker that we're going to put on video. So we thank you for your courage, for accepting to be on video with us. And we hope that our audience is going to enjoy this chat. I hope you're having a good day.
I am having a good day. Being the fact that I'm the first on video, it's more like you put a gun to my head. Let's be honest here, hey?
Yeah.
You put more of a gun to my head for me to be the first on video. But
Sorry.
thank you for
Sorry to put
having
that, but
me.
I was like, it sounds like you're a very courageous person, and it means we can have a conversation that is very fun. And the fact that you chose the chat podcast, so I was like, let's go with it. But if you have a gun if you have a gun on your head, it means we're gonna get good answers from you.
Oh, the pressure's on. The pressure's on. But let's see what we can do.
Wonderful, Brenda. Keep the Grind Up is all about perseverance, right?
Okay.
Can you take us back to the beginning of your journey? What were some of the biggest challenges you faced when starting in cybersecurity?
So without giving too much of my age away, because hey,
Mhm.
I'm old, right?
But you don't look like it. You look
Oh,
like you're 20 years old plus plus a few months.
you're too kind. Black don't crack.
All
So
right.
my journey started a couple of years ago.
Mhm,
Obviously, ideally, us coming from African families,
mhm,
when you tell your parents that it's time to go to university or to high school, you
mhm,
start the conversation around what do you want to be, where do you want to
mhm,
go, and the
mhm,
like. So, being an African, you always have, is it about four career paths? Lawyer,
mhm,
doctor, accountant, the
mhm,
traditional
mhm,
ones that come to that. So my mom wanted me to be a doctor, my dad wanted me to be a lawyer,
mhm,
and I didn't like either due to, I think the lawyer part was, I hated reading, which is actually ironic because everything I do in cybersecurity, because of the pace of what everything and how everything comes up, I do a
mhm.
lot of reading.
Yes.
Whereas the doctor side, I can't do what, 6 years undergrad, then another 5 years to
Yes.
specialize, and then
Yes.
I was like, yeah, that's gonna
Yes.
take a long time. So
Yes.
when I was in high school, I stumbled upon computers, and I was
Mhm,
really, really good at them.
mhm.
I had started like typing back in the day. There was a typing tutor called Mavis Beacon. I don't know whether
Mhm.
you've heard of it. Yeah. So
No.
it allowed you to type with the QWERTY
Mhm,
keyboard. So at high
mhm,
school, I used to do that, and then I think I just developed the interest around computers.
mhm,
So kind of veered into what exactly would this look like
mhm,
for
mhm.
me, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I began that journey to computer sciences.
Mhm.
So after I completed my high school, I went into university,
Yeah.
and I did an undergrad in computer and information sciences.
Mhm.
I had programming. I sucked
Yeah.
completely. Java programming, I did it
All right.
twice, hated it
Yes.
with a passion.
Mhm.
Purely, purely survived just to get my degree. That's how bad it was,
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
I knew that if I veered into this industry, the programming aspect wouldn't be for me, you know.
Okay. Okay.
Got my undergrad, started looking for opportunities to work. I joined a
Yeah.
small little company in South Africa. They were an
Mhm.
IBM partner.
Okay.
And when I started there, I kind of started doing service-oriented architecture, so building
Mhm.
processes within. But
Mhm.
God has a sense of humor because
Mhm.
the other thing I was doing there was training, kids that had just come out of university,
Okay.
Java entry level programming.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Uh-huh.
Very interesting. Very good sense of humor that God has at
Yes.
this point in time. So
Mhm.
did the training around Java for a couple of months to a year, and then
Mhm.
transitioned into the service-oriented architecture. And then obviously the opportunity came when I transitioned to Microsoft. And who says no to Microsoft? I mean,
Mhm.
it's a good
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yes.
So joined Microsoft, and I don't know whether they still have it, but it was an internship program
Mhm.
that I kind of joined in with various other people across EMEA. At that time,
Mhm.
they were trying to strategize in shifting the thought process by bringing in fresh blood, but also people that might not necessarily be the traditional technologists that you have within the business to kind of,
Yes.
shake up the thinking.
Mhm.
So gained that opportunity, which was, I think, one of the best things. And since then, I believe it's one of the things that has opened up the doors for me in my
Yeah.
career.
Mhm.
So joined Microsoft, stayed there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And what I did there, another thing I hated was sales.
Mhm. Mhm.
And my role involved sales, but a good soft skill
Yes.
nonetheless for
Yes.
later on in life. So
Mhm.
yeah, so
Mhm.
I was responsible for public sector
Mhm.
and entities in South Africa and for the
Mhm.
education sector entities. So like over 100 and what 40
Mhm.
clients or so. So
Yeah.
spent the time on the road back and forth, and I looked after the productivity space
Yeah.
within the Microsoft business.
Mhm.
I then kind of started getting itchy. I think it was around the time that leadership was changing. So Satya Nadella was coming into power, and there was a conversation around going more digital, more SaaS, services, more
Mhm.
Azure services, more security services,
Mhm.
and the security components that had started coming up, and those they're quite interesting for me.
Yeah.
And honestly, on the side, the other thing is that I used to watch things like CSI, if I'm being
Okay.
honest, and
Okay.
which we all know is not like the real,
Yes.
cybersecurity. Some of those things are embellished, but
Yeah.
did a lot of like CSI, Criminal Minds. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's my pastime type of things.
Mhm.
So yeah, did a lot of that, and then part that tried to transition within the business, but I kind of knew that I needed to go and skill up on this thing called cybersecurity because, our industry,
Mhm.
we like changing the names of something that has already existed for a very long time. So,
Yes.
information security, give
Yeah.
it a sexier name, you move it to cybersecurity.
Mhm.
So, I wanted to go back to school and kind of transition and see what my current skills that I had would be able to help me in transitioning to what I needed to do. So did a bold move.
Mhm.
Yeah, kind of shocked everybody in the family when I did
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
And I decided to move to Europe.
Wow.
And on top
Interesting.
of that, I
Mhm.
decided to move to a non-English speaking country, which was Spain.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
got an opportunity to join one of the top business schools in Spain.
Mhm.
They were starting to they had started a master's degree around cybersecurity, and it was the right mix for me because it was in between the tech folk and the business folk. And
Mhm.
there's always that gap where
Mhm.
when you go to your C-suite, they don't
Yeah.
understand what the technical people are talking about, and your technical people don't understand the ones and zeros that need,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
important to the C-suite. So
Yeah. Which
I
is
found that
interesting
that
to
was a
mention that
exactly,
that was back then, as
exactly,
things started changing,
exactly.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's still the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So subsequently after that, I just found that this was going to be a right space for me to
Mm-hmm.
kind of join and do what I needed to do. So got an opportunity. So it's called IE Business School, which is
Okay.
Institutional de Empresa in Spanish,
In Spanish.
and
Okay.
did a 10-month course-driven master's degree.
Okay.
Now, my aim was to get into the consultancy business.
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a strategy in the sense that if you know that consultancy businesses, you kind of work on different projects and in different areas in different sectors. So it's a very
Yeah.
easy way for one to ramp up quickly with a skill
Mm-hmm.
set that they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
improve on. So I decided to join one of the big fours
Mm-hmm.
at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Jumped into, I guess, having Microsoft on my CV did help. So
Yeah.
joined Deloitte, did some work with Deloitte, and then I got to a point where because there was a language barrier for me,
Mm-hmm.
and the only things I knew in Spanish was like, how to order alcohol or,
Yeah. How to say
or
hi,
not how
greetings.
to say hi,
Okay.
not things that would actually help me
Yes.
from a from a career perspective.
Yes.
I also, at the time, with my husband, we were looking at places of where to kind of relocate and be together because I had since
Mm-hmm.
left South Africa.
Okay.
So yeah, so we got the opportunity to move to the UK,
Okay.
and I joined and subsequently another consultancy house
Which is where
within the
you are
UK.
currently based, right?
This is where I'm currently based. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Sorry for
and
cybersecurity. It's like I've just disclosed your location.
well, to a degree.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm currently based in the UK
Mm-hmm.
with another big four
Mm-hmm.
and have enjoyed the ride.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, our industry is ever changing. There are people
Mm-hmm.
that do not sleep in terms of threats and the like. And I think the crazy thing is that every time I tell people I'm in this industry of information security or cybersecurity, however you want to
Mm-hmm.
relate to it, it's
Mm-hmm.
always, are you a hacker? No, I'm not a hacker. I hated programming.
Yeah.
So I do
Mm-hmm.
not do hacking.
Yeah.
But ideally, what I do is, like you rightly said in my intro, is more advisory work with businesses.
Okay.
So looking at the governance, risk, and compliance, and trying to see how to strengthen the environment or the posture of
Mm-hmm.
certain businesses and clients. Yeah. So yeah,
That's
that's
wonderful,
pretty
Brenda.
much
That's an
yeah.
amazing journey. It's an amazing journey, seeing where you came from, some of the challenges you faced, and how you kept going. It's really interesting, and see where
Yeah.
you are today. I know cybersecurity is a
Hmm.
male-dominated industry, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like navigating this space, and what mindset helped you break through? Brenda, a female African in cybersecurity, how did you feel? The industry being male-dominated.
Good question.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I think in my path to this technology space, there were a few women that were
Mhm.
in my industry. So
Okay.
I'm very big on representation.
Yes.
I think it's very, very important. I think to your point that you've stipulated that the tech industry, as much as many other industries, are predominantly male dominated, and
Mhm.
representation allows for younger girls to dream big and also see themselves there. So I had
Yeah.
the fortunate opportunity to have been surrounded by incredible people who offered me
Mhm.
wisdom, who
Mhm.
offered me support. On occasion, they give me a reality check,
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
um, I tend to refer to them as my tribe, and my tribe consists of close friends and family, but also acquaintances from or mentors that I seek and look at. Yeah. So I think that has helped with navigating.
Mhm.
I'm very good at networking with people. I
Mhm.
would like to say I easily make friends with people.
Okay. Okay.
So
Okay.
that usually plays in my favor. I'm a
Mhm.
bubbly personality and
Yeah.
never afraid to ask questions, which I think is an important thing. So where I didn't know,
Mhm.
sought advice, even from men.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just that I'm
Mhm.
going to look for advice from women. I went to ask men, how did you do it? How did you get where you are? And in most cases, a lot of people are always open to give you that information,
Mhm.
as always. So yeah, that's pretty much how I've
That's
tried to
amazing.
navigate this industry.
Yes, it's interesting that you share that, and I can vouch for on your easy way of making friends. Which makes me remember how we met. We met at
Yeah,
Microsoft. We maybe met not more than 3 times, but you remembered
yeah,
me the moment I reached out and say,
yeah,
"Hey, Brenda, just keep the grind up, and you gotta be there. We gotta talk about your
yeah,
journey." You remembered, and that made me and how we caught up quickly. I can
yeah,
vouch for how you easily keep your relationships.
yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us. From a mindset shift
Mhm.
perspective, what is one mindset shift you had to make that completely changed the trajectory of your career?
I think open.
Because remember in the sorry to cut you. Remember in the
Uh,
introduction, you talked about how the expectations that we have in some of our origins, where the
yeah,
families on
yeah,
what we're supposed to
yeah,
do
yeah,
versus what you went to study.
yeah,
On top of that, even after studying versus what you went to do after.
yeah,
So there were quite changes,
yeah,
which were good for you, which were good based on the plans you wanted, and you
yeah.
seem very successful in what you're doing. So what was that mindset shift that you had to make to completely change the trajectory of your career?
So it's a couple of things, right?
Yeah.
And that's a good question. I was actually thinking
Yes.
of it. Um, you know, I don't know whether you recall this. We did some training in Microsoft around mindsets. I don't know
Mhm.
whether you recall,
Yep. Always. Oh,
those that
yes.
there's always that conversation about, change,
Yes.
broaden your mindset, change your mindset, and the
Yes.
like. So obviously, from a career perspective, things like
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
kind of helped. But prior to that, um, I would like to say I'm a certified overthinker. So my brain runs.
Where did you get your certification from?
Hey, not tell the institution that kind of gives us, certification, but ideally,
All
I'm
right.
an
Yeah.
overthinker
Hmm.
and I like to plan,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And um, even going, this has been great because it's allowed me to kind of go back to where I started and kind of share the story. But when I
Yeah.
think of where I started and how I'm sharing the story,
Hmm.
I had planned a couple of steps ahead. I kind of knew. I tend to have about a couple of plans. Plan A, B, C, maybe D,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
E.
Yes.
I'm also highly stubborn to
Yes.
a certain degree, which can be
Okay.
a good thing or a bad thing.
Bad thing.
But
Okay.
it tends to work in
Yeah.
that favor.
Hmm.
So when it came to mind shifting, I had to remove myself,
Hmm.
especially from the overthinking aspect, because I don't tend to relish in the accomplishments that I
Hmm.
have. Because I'm
Yeah.
an overthinker, I
Yeah.
accomplish a goal and I go to the next
And you
goal,
go to the next call.
and
Yeah.
then
Hmm.
I go to the next one.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I have to be intentional these days to actually sit down and smell the coffee, literally,
Okay.
like sit down,
Yes.
take a cup
Like.
of coffee,
Hmm.
take a deep breath and smell it.
Yeah.
That has helped as well
Hmm.
in terms of shifting the mindset. So, training, obviously, challenging yourself,
Yeah.
challenging, obviously, our mindset as coming from an African background and what was done traditionally or back in the day versus what the 21st century opportunities are there, and
Hmm.
keeping what works,
Yeah.
from, because
Hmm.
there's a lot of substance in the stuff in our culture and where we've come from. But then there are
Hmm.
also things that need to change from that perspective as well in order
Hmm.
for us to be able to live in the society that we are in today. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of that. So that being intentional and taking a pause.
Hmm.
Um, you know, these days I I like to walk. I've started swimming again. So things like
Yeah.
that in terms of just trying to take a pause and trying to, you know,
Hmm.
breathe a little bit.
Yeah. Hmm.
And another thing is that I'm very, very big on mental wellness.
Okay.
So I am a huge advocate of therapy,
Yeah.
huge advocate of therapy.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes because of who we are as a people, there's that unbiasedness when it comes to therapy,
Yeah.
in terms of only either mental people go to seek therapy
Hmm.
or,
Hmm.
if
Yeah.
there's a problem.
Hmm.
So I always try to look at it this way. If you've got a headache, you're
Hmm.
going to take a painkiller to kind of help you ease
Hmm.
that pain. Or if you've
Yeah.
got, whatever body pain it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not feeling well, you're going to go to the hospital to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
also, you're going to exercise so that you don't have bad health.
Mm-hmm.
So, mental wellness for me is that exercising. You don't always
Okay.
have to have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of helps you reflect. And I think as a people, sometimes when we have family and friends telling us something,
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't land properly. But then when you have a totally individual, non-biased person,
Mm-hmm.
telling you almost the same thing, you're like, oh, light bulb moment, so it's
Yes.
it's that. So I'm very, very huge on mental welfare, mental health, and the like. So yeah, those are my mindset
Mindset
tools.
shift.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, and the audience and I will really are really seeing how amazing this is, and this insight are helping. Your career has evolved across different roles, right? Even different countries. Born Zambian, South
Mm-hmm,
Africa,
mm-hmm,
Spain.
mm-hmm.
Didn't like the language much. No, 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 not that you didn't like the language much, but you just couldn't
I
or
couldn't
didn't have
progress.
the
Yeah,
opportunity to
yeah,
learn it
yeah,
as much. Move to the UK.
yeah,
So your career has evolved across different
yeah.
roles and different countries. How do you know when it's time to pivot? And how do you approach change?
Oh gosh, you're really you're laying these questions thick, right?
because you said you had a gun on your
Yeah,
head.
it's
So
a
let's go.
weekend. It's a weekend. I'm supposed to be an easy chat.
Yes.
How do I know when to pivot?
Yes.
I think, like I mentioned earlier
Yeah.
on, I tend to be an overthinker,
Hmm.
and that comes with wanting to be challenged a lot,
Yeah.
from a career perspective.
Hmm.
So I I crave challenges
Hmm. Hmm.
on a regular basis. And
Hmm.
sometimes I question my own sanity because, sometimes being comfortable where you are is great, but then
Hmm.
that doesn't
Hmm.
always satisfy who I am as a personality. I'm always looking for something
Yeah.
big, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm also my biggest inner critic,
Yeah. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So I tend to do a lot of self-evaluation in terms
Yeah.
of,
Hmm.
okay, this year, what is it that I want to achieve from a personal perspective? What do I want to achieve from a career perspective? And all
Hmm.
the different aspects, yes,
Hmm.
spiritual perspective, and like, do
Yeah.
I always get it right? No,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
always.
Not always.
But
Hmm.
with that, it kind of allows me to have a blueprint of where it is that I want to navigate to. So usually, to answer your question, I tend to pivot when I feel that I'm not growing or I'm not being challenged as I specifically need to be challenged.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's when
That's
I'll pivot. Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
pivot. And then
Yeah.
how do you approach that change? I don't know if you've talked about it, but how do you when you start feeling like you're not growing, then how do you start approaching the change?
So let's say I decided to become a doctor. Not that I
Hmm.
would, but let's say,
Yes.
it's one of
Yes.
those things that I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I want to pivot into
Hmm.
medicine.
Hmm.
The next best thing is obviously I would check what skill sets I have right now that I can
Hmm.
transfer, and then I'll
Yeah.
check. I'd almost do a gap analysis of what it is that
Okay.
I have versus what I need to
Hmm.
achieve.
Hmm.
And then I'll start looking at my network and see who I have in that particular network that can help me achieve these specific things, right?
Okay. Hmm.
So that's usually the area or the methodology that I use when it comes to pivoting. There's
Hmm.
always somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, or somebody
Yeah.
within your inner circle that can kind of
Hmm.
give you the information that you need to go where you want to go to. So I think the
Hmm.
most important thing is having a vision
Hmm.
of at least where it is that you want to go, have some sort of
Hmm.
a plan. It might not
Yeah.
always go the same way that, I mean, if I tell you the different mishaps that happened in terms of to get where I am today, it wasn't a
Yeah.
straight line. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I think it's about gap analysis, checking who in your inner circle or in your network that you can use,
Hmm. Hmm.
and get guidance from,
Hmm.
and doing the work
Hmm.
to skill yourself up there and proceed. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, gap analyses, who can help you, and then how do you proceed? You've had mentors who helped you shape your journey,
Yeah.
right? I believe so, yeah. Because that was my next question, but I think you've talked about it, how
Yeah.
you deal with your relationship, sorry, and how you ask questions around. It seems you already looked
Yeah.
into that part of having mentors. Now that you're
Yeah.
in a leadership position, with everything that you do, whether social or professional work, how do you approach mentoring others? How do you approach mentorship for others?
So I believe mentorship is different for different people.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, I have physical mentors, people that I have a relationship with. So maybe like me and you, right? Where
Yeah.
we have conversations.
Yeah.
And then I also have mentors or coaches because it's one or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it
Mm-hmm.
can be both.
Yeah.
So I also have mentors or coaches
Mm-hmm.
in every aspect of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So the spiritual side, you've
Yeah.
got the personal side, and then you've got your professional side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I also seek mentorship in unexpected places
Mm-hmm.
that would not necessarily come out as a mentor, because usually when you hear mentorship, it's like you're either in a mentorship program or you're talking to a
Mm-hmm.
person one on one.
Yeah.
But listening to podcasts, like all
Mm-hmm.
your listeners,
Mm-hmm.
and keep up the grind,
Yep.
that is mentorship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
reading books,
Mm-hmm.
be it an
Mm-hmm.
autobiography or be it, some sort of self-help,
Mm-hmm.
assessment. That is a form of mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
So when I approach mentorship,
Mm-hmm.
I do that, I try to do it in a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
have young ladies that I still keep in touch with. So they've
Yeah.
actually, from a mentorship program, it's transitioned into coaching and
Mm-hmm. Okay.
helping with career moves.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just keep in touch, on a regular basis of, oh, how's the career going? Oh, what's the next move? What's that? Other people are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, can I just bounce this off you? How
Yeah.
would you do it? How would you
Mm-hmm.
navigate? And
Mm-hmm.
recently, well, not recently, a couple of years ago, I joined. You mentioned the Women in Technology Network, which I'm a founder of,
Yeah.
and the real essence of building that network was obviously to provide a safe space for women to be able to grow in their career path, and specifically those that are in the STEM industry,
Yes.
but also the mentorship aspect of it, because again, representation matters. It's
Yes.
only now
Mm-hmm.
that we're seeing more women in leadership positions
Yeah.
versus a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a mentorship program actually within that network, where we do a 3 month or so course
Mm-hmm.
or program,
Mm-hmm.
where we get the ladies in the network that are in leadership positions, and then we assign young ladies to them. It's
Mm-hmm.
done virtually. If those that are in Zambia, they meet physically.
Mm-hmm.
There's no prescriptive around it precisely, apart
Mm-hmm.
from the duration of the time and that you need to be present. I
Yes.
also look at mentorship in the sense that when I seek a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
I I I need to do most of the work as the mentee,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I need to know what my goals are. I need to know what I want to achieve from this relationship, and I need to almost be that driving force.
Yeah.
And what we found is that usually the young ladies hear mentorship and they're expecting the mentor to be the one to
Yeah.
be
To be
driving the
the one.
agenda.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's also shifting that mindset of where,
Yeah.
when you're talking to the young ladies, to say, the career is literally in your hands. You can make what your
Yeah.
career is. You have all
Mm-hmm.
these women that you wouldn't necessarily get access to. I mean, there are
Mm-hmm.
ladies that are CISOs
Mm-hmm.
in our thing, CTOs,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
information man. These people are busy,
Yes.
and they're
I agree.
sacrificing 3 months for you.
Yes.
So that's how we kind of look at that. On
Mm-hmm.
a more personal level,
Mm-hmm.
I recently had an electrifying mentorship moment, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure whether you know of her, but her name is Bozoma St. John,
No, I don't know
and
her.
she was actually in London. So
Mm-hmm.
her CV is, when you have some time, go and look at her CV. But basically, she's ex-CMO, Netflix,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
brand officer, Uber.
Okay. Interesting. I'm going to search her as you're
She
speaking.
did. She was, I think, the um, global marketing and consumer director for Apple, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She put Beyonce on the halftime Super Bowl
Okay.
show.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
the resume
So,
speaks for itself,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she also has her own type of mentorship program,
Mm-hmm.
which is called the
Mm-hmm.
Badass,
Mm-hmm.
almost Badass Academy, something along those lines. by Bozoma St. John's. And it was birthed from people asking, how did you get to, I mean, CMO of Netflix? How did you get
Mm-hmm.
to, all of those things? She's a
Mm-hmm.
Black woman. She's of
Mm-hmm.
African descent.
Mm-hmm.
Those are like far and
Mm-hmm.
few in between, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So things like that, even going to her talk was really, really electrifying. She was in
Mm-hmm.
London a couple of weeks ago, and I literally went there. Well, had the time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
She exudes confidence when she walks into a room. She demands it. So you, even with that, you start to learn things as you see different
Yes.
people that you either admire or like their work or seeing their journey grow. You start to pick up one or two things from them and see how you can actually implement it in your own life. So yeah, I think that's pretty much how I try to look at mentorship. And also when I do mentor, I'm very intentional. And
Mm-hmm.
when I don't have the capacity, I'm also intentional in saying that I don't have the capacity right now. But if you need like a coaching, it works well.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that you mentioned that part, the last part about when you know you don't have the capacity,
Yeah.
and knowing that you don't know. Uh, my next question is maybe or maybe not related.
Hmm.
Even the most successful people deal with
Hmm.
imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome. Have you faced it?
Oh,
And
heck yes.
how do you handle self doubt when it creeps in? Because the moment self doubt creeps in, we I don't know if we go back to our nature, how we behave, but if you faced it, how do you handle self doubt when it creeps in on you?
So, do I have imposter syndrome? Absolutely. I don't think, well, let me not speak for all of people, but I think majority of people, even in the
Yeah,
most powerful positions, have some sort of imposter syndrome that
yeah.
kind of dashes in. Um, how do I deal with it? Hmm, good question. Um, Pause.
Hmm.
This whole pausing thing is quite intentional, right? This whole mental
Yep.
thing is quite intentional these days. Like I said, I certified overthinker. So my
Yep.
my brain stays I like to replay scenarios like when you have
Yes.
like a glitchy DVD that keeps on going
Yes.
and you play
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much what happens there. Um,
Yes.
so what do I do? I try to take a pause.
Hmm.
And also imposter syndrome comes to a certain degree when you don't have confidence in who you are, the decision that you're making, or what you're trying to achieve. So, just do that internal check. Okay, was it the
Hmm.
right decision?
Yes.
Did I have the right information at the right time to make this decision? You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
who's been affected by this decision and in what way
Hmm.
have they been affected by the decision or,
Hmm.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then, am I willing to take the consequences of this decision? Because with every decision
Hmm.
comes consequences,
Hmm.
positive or negative. There are
Yes.
consequences, right?
Hmm.
So if it goes to the left, am I
Hmm.
willing to take that on? If it goes to the right, am I willing to enjoy the fruits of that labor? So that's again, it's more of a pause, but also you gotta tell yourself you're the shit sometimes,
Hmm.
even though you don't believe it.
Yes.
Affirmations
Very
and all of that
important.
stuff,
Affirmation.
it's very
Yes.
important.
Yes.
So affirm yourself,
Hmm.
give yourself thing. But I think another important thing, and I've spoken about it a lot of times, is around your tribe and the company you keep,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
Because you also need people, you need people to give you a reality check, but you
Okay.
also need people to be the ones that
Encourage you.
push you and
Push you.
encourage you. You
Mm.
need, you need, there's this, how do I say it? There's usually this thing of women cannot support women.
Okay.
There's that, oh, women tend to like to backstab each other and stuff like that.
Hmm.
My friends and I try to change that narrative.
Hmm.
You,
Hmm.
I believe there's enough glory for everybody in the world to do what they're
Yes.
doing because we're
Hmm.
all significantly differently made.
Hmm. There's room for all
Um,
of us to shine.
there's room for all of us to shine.
Yes. Hmm.
And um, if me helping you allows you to shine,
Hmm.
then why shouldn't I do that?
Hmm.
Why can't I go the extra mile?
Hmm.
So yeah, we keeping that group of people around that are good for a reality check, but also when you're down and under, they're the same one telling you, no, you're the one. You're hype people. It's very
Yes.
good.
Hmm.
And also my husband is, one of my biggest supporters. So,
Hmm.
sometimes when I need a good
Hmm.
hype and a
Yeah.
good reality check,
Yes.
I check in with him as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. Between, I would like to see around balancing and avoiding burnout because it's very important in our career. It's very important in our personal lives because it
Yeah.
impacts both sides.
Yeah.
Between cybersecurity, leadership, and now podcasting, you have a lot on your plate. How do you
Yeah.
manage your energy and avoid burnout? Because if you burn out, your family suffers. You burn out, your work suffers. So how do you manage that energy?
To be honest, it's a work in progress.
Okay.
I do not believe there's a work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. I'm yet to see
You have to see
it.
it. Yes.
I'm yet to see it because
Yes.
ideally, one thing you will drop the ball
Okay.
in one way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there are parts where you're driving something in your career, your
Mm-hmm.
home life will suffer. That parts when you're trying to drive something from your home perspective,
Mm-hmm.
your career will suffer. I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I'm yet to find this
You're
balance that people
yet,
talk about. I'm yet to find
but I
it.
can
I'm yet
share with
to.
you a little secret. It exists.
Mhm.
I can share with you a little secret. It exists, and because you're working on it, you're going to find it.
No,
Trust me.
I would say maybe to challenge you on that one. I'll say it
Uh-huh.
exists because you put up boundaries.
Exactly. That's
Boundaries
one. That's
allow
one step.
allow for it to somewhat exist,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Right? Because
Yes.
for example, in consultancy you have late hours, sometimes you work weekends and stuff like that.
Mm. Yes.
If I do what I need to do during the week and say I'm not working, post this time or whatever the case is, then my home life won't suffer. And then
Yeah.
alternatively communicate at home to say, okay, this week is going to be a little bit busy. I'm not going to be available as always, So I think if you look at it from that perspective, maybe it does
Mm-hmm.
exist, but alternatively, good communication is required
Mm-hmm.
in all aspects of your life to kind of communicate
Yes.
expectations and
Yes.
and
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
outcomes and realities, and also have that possibility to say, this is going to drop this week. I will make
Mm-hmm.
it up to you next week
Okay.
on either
Okay.
side, right?
So there you go. You're starting to find
No,
that balance.
no. Because when
Yeah.
you talk
Yeah.
about work-life balance, people think
Yes.
it's, when you have that scale, like it's
Yeah. The
literally.
scale and
Uh-uh.
it's
It
equal. Yeah.
doesn't. It's
Yes.
never
Uh-huh.
equal. It's
Mm-hmm.
always,
It's always balancing.
it's always worth trying to balance it. There is
Okay.
no balance.
There's no
It's
balance.
that there is no balance. Like I said, I'm yet to find it.
The day
But
you discover it, again, I'm gonna tell
I'll
you,
call you.
there is light at the end of the tunnel. The day you discover it, please give me a heads up. Say, hey, Christian,
I'll
I
give you a
just
shout.
found the balance. Yes.
I'll give you a shout.
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
in terms of trying to avoid the burnout,
Yeah.
when I'm not working,
Mm-hmm.
I either spend time with family and friends. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a way
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Yeah.
I like reality TV because for
Okay.
me, it's a way of just
Mm-hmm.
zoning out and
Mm-hmm.
watching stuff
Okay.
that I don't have to think about.
Yes.
Audiobooks. Personally, I don't like reading physical books, which I
Okay.
always say I'm in the wrong industry because I need to read
You need to
physical
read
books.
books.
But
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
whenever I can, I get into like an audiobook.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Music, you
Mm-hmm.
know, my what I call my expensive
Mm-hmm.
hobby, which is traveling. So
Okay.
whenever I
Mm-hmm.
find extra cents
Mm-hmm.
around the house,
Yes.
try
Yes.
book a trip to go away. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
usually what I try to do in my free time to alleviate the burnout.
I love that.
Yeah,
Amazing,
yeah,
amazing. And when we see your journey, where you've gone to, how you face challenges, from how you avoid your burnout, and how you make sure that you always show up your best. When you look ahead now in the
yeah.
future and your legacy, what impact do you hope to leave in cybersecurity and beyond as Brenda?
Dude, what's with these philosophical questions?
They're not philosophical, but I don't know if they're philosophical, but
They're
it's the fact
deep.
that you've done you've done so much amazing work on yourself,
Yeah.
and and that's one thing why we have keep the grind up, and that's
Yeah.
why we call it a story shop, because it
Yes.
helps our audience comes in and say, how do I see myself in one of these stories, and can I learn from some of these people who have gone ahead before me, and some of the things that they've gone through, can can that help me in my journey as well? And every time we talk about the journey, we know that there is a past, there's a present, and there's a future. So you've done so much good. And are you thinking about your future when you're looking at what do you look ahead? You already does, because you're a certified person on overthinking. So
Absolutely.
I'm sure it's something you thought of, and we would like to get a bit of an insight on that, of what impact do you hope to leave in cybersecurity and beyond.
So I'm requoting here, but there's the popular Maya Angelou quote of, leaving a legacy of how people you make people feel.
Hmm. Hmm.
And all the sorry to the poets who are fans of Maya Angelou, I should have had it ready for me, but to quote it, but I think you
Yes.
all know what quote I'm speaking about right now. And I
Yes.
think that's ideally a legacy that I'd like to leave in terms of every interaction that I've had with somebody. How did I make them feel?
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Mm.
I don't always get it right. I'm human. I make mistakes.
Hmm.
But I like to think that when I do make the mistakes, I'm open for a conversation to rectify the mistake,
Like
right?
that. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So I would like that with every person that I connect, mentor, coach,
Hmm.
do business with, um,
Hmm.
I at least leave you learning one lesson from me.
Hmm.
It could be a
Hmm.
positive lesson, it could be a
Yep.
negative lesson,
Negative.
but you're going
Hmm.
to learn something,
I'm gonna
right?
learn something. Yep.
Um, I try to be intentional about being kind, compassionate. I think naturally my personality is like that, but
Yes.
also I know when to put up the boundaries and call out when I need to call out something. So
Yes.
yeah, I think, like I said so many times, life is not a competition.
Yep.
There is room
Hmm.
for everybody to go
Hmm.
ahead.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I feel that if I can help open that door, if
Hmm.
I have a connect, if I have financial means, if I
Hmm.
have,
Hmm.
even things like resharing stuff on social media, that helps somebody in one way or
Exactly.
another building their
It
business,
does.
right?
Yes.
And it does not take anything away from you,
I
you know.
agree. Hmm.
So things like that. I'd like to hope that whoever I've touched upon has a good memory of me.
Hmm. Hmm.
I might be a villain in some people's stories. That's fine.
Yes.
We
Uh-huh.
take
Hmm.
account into it. If you want us
Yes.
to discuss me being the villain, hey, let's have that conversation. But but
Yes.
ideally, connecting, uplifting, and throwing kindness where I can is what I'd like my legacy to be.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. You've talked about you liking reality show. Now, a day in the life of Brenda.
Oh God.
If we had a 24-hour reality show following you, right? Instead of the
It
other
would
people
be
you
it
usually
would be
show.
boring. It would be
Are you
absolutely
sure?
boring.
What
Absolutely.
would you give us an insight into what would a typical day look like?
Are we talking about work day or non-work day?
Let's see. Interesting. You bounced the question back to me.
Now my turn.
Work day or non-work day? Let's take a work day, because do you know why I'm asking that?
Yeah.
I'll let you know after the answer why I was asking that. Work day.
Oh, that's not how we do this. But anyhow, okay, work day.
Yeah.
24 hours.
Yes.
So it depends.
Hmm.
I think being in consulting, you
Yes.
go to bed one day and then the next day the deliverables kind of change or the scope
Yes.
changes. So
Yes.
um ideally, sometimes I work from home, sometimes I work in the office or I go to the client space. So
Hmm.
depending on which it is in that day. So sometimes I'm either going to be working from home or
Hmm.
I will have to be on site at the client or I'll be at our offices.
Hmm.
So, get up, check out emails. Usually I have calls
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
the morning. So a lot of
Hmm.
calls, either daily check-ins,
Hmm.
trying to, prepare for the day. What are the
Yep.
deliverables for the day?
Hmm.
what important meetings need to go out, what important emails need to be responded to,
Mm-hmm.
tracking the progress of what we're supposed to be doing on the
Mm-hmm.
engagement,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah, and then go through that. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I have lunch, sometimes I don't have. Like I said, depending on my
Yes.
day, it's
Mm-hmm.
full on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And going back to mental health and being intentional, if there's no need for me to work past a certain hour that is
Yes.
allocated in my contract, I try
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
log off and go and take a walk or go
Mm-hmm.
and do something so that I can distress and the
Mm-hmm.
like. So yeah, I think it's pretty much meetings, um, dealing with clients,
Mm-hmm.
exciting that is,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
dealing with
Mm-hmm.
clients,
Mm-hmm.
trying to meet expectations.
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes
Yeah.
they may be reasonable, sometimes they might not be reasonable, having
Yes.
that
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, and then after that, just try to have an hour or two to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, it's starting to get warmer here. So
Yeah.
taking a
Mm-hmm.
walk out,
Yeah.
or going for a swim, then come at home and spend time with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And become a couch potato and watch my reality shows.
Reality show. All right.
And if
Interesting.
I need to do something for obviously the other, like my personal stuff in terms of driving either the podcast or, stuff on that side, then
Mm-hmm.
I kind of jump onto that as well. So yeah, it's like I said, very boring. 24 hours.
It's
Yeah.
not. It. I mean, I don't know
Mhm.
why you want to call it boring, but exactly why I took the work
Uh-huh.
answer instead of the personal one because I
Yeah.
wanted to see how you're doing your work-life balance.
Got you.
Yes. So, uh, o- a last question that I have. I don't know if it's deep, but we
All
still have
your
a gun
questions
on
have been
you.
deep.
When you are deep in focus mode,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you said you're now very intentional about your well-being, about the mental side. When you're deep in focus mode, what's playing in the background? Is it music? Is it music? Is it a podcast? Is it just complete silence?
I'm going to go with option D, all of the above. It depends, really.
I like that.
So it
Yes,
depends. I
it
think
depends.
if I'm trying to deliver something, it's probably got to be silent. If there's a deadline around that.
Mhm.
If I've been frustrated, maybe some music,
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
background, dance it off, sing
Mhm.
it off, type
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
Um,
And I usually
if
call it music therapy. When I
me
put music,
exactly right,
music therapy. Yes.
and
Yeah.
it's the rock and the Afro beats and
Yes.
you're crazy, going crazy.
Yes.
And then if it's other times it's podcasts like and usually like I mean on YouTube there are a couple of things that I like to follow, be it spiritual, be it you know certain celebrities that I just have an interest in their lives and what they're doing and kind of
Yes.
admire their hustle and grind and see
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing in their area and space. So,
Mm-hmm.
watch one of those things. Um, Other times it could be the news, though I try to avoid the news. The world is crazy at this
That is
moment in time. So,
that is very
so
interesting to have the news. I mean, that's you, but very interesting to have the news play in the background.
it's not honestly it's not deliberate.
Yep.
Usually, like for example, when my husband's working from home,
Yes.
he likes to watch the news.
Okay.
So I usually get my news updates from him in
Mm-hmm.
terms of
Mm-hmm.
where the world's going crazy at this point in
Yes.
time.
Yes.
So sometimes it's by default. He might have left the TV on, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yes.
not that I instinctively go and
Yes.
think.
Yes.
But again, the news thing also comes from my dad growing up.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He typical, African dad, newspapers.
Yes.
He buys
Mm-hmm.
all the five newspapers and he
Yes.
tries to get the news from each angle and,
Yes.
watch TV. So he'll
Mm-hmm.
watch the same story from Sky News, from
Mm-hmm.
BBC, from, all of these different components. I think
Yes.
subconsciously that's
Mm-hmm.
also there. So yeah. So that's pretty much my playlist of things that I like to do.
That's interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, Brenda. This wraps up the gun on your head of in the podcast. But we're really glad that you came up on the podcast, sharing your journey and how you faced challenges and how you've got to where you've got today, and how you keep on going to making sure that people are impacted positively by you, and making sure that people can learn from you. Really appreciate that. And if people wanted, what is one last thing you'd like the audience to know before we go?
God, I've given a lot of my secrets away. What's
Yes.
the one last thing? I think I'll probably repeat some of the stuff that I've said already.
Yes.
There's room for everybody to succeed.
Okay.
I think you need to be open.
Yeah.
You need to have the open mindset, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm.
And I think it's okay to ask for help when you need it. It does
Okay.
not make you any weaker, or, it's okay to be vulnerable. I think vulnerability is actually a strength, though
Wonderful.
sometimes people see it as a weakness.
Hmm.
And yeah, there's always somebody out there willing to give you the information if you ask. And the
Very
worst they
true.
can say is no, and then you move on
Hmm.
to the next person.
Yes.
So yeah.
That's wonderful. Where do our audience can find you? Where would you like them to find you, or where can our audience
Oh,
find you?
so podcast Honeypot Chats.
Hmm.
It's on the majority of the what are these called? Streaming platforms. So
Okay.
your Apple, your Spotify, and the like.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Full transparency, we've gone on a somewhat of a life break. So
Okay.
we're trying to get back to it.
Okay. Yeah. Hmm.
My co-host and I are trying to get back there. The last 2 years
Hmm.
or so has been life
Hmm.
has been lifing. Let's just put it that
Yes.
way. So
I
so
I understand you. I had that moment for Keep the Grind. Keep the Grind Up was launched in 2022. Then
yeah,
my daughter came the next year, the following year. There
yeah,
was a break in there.
yeah,
I even
yeah,
had some recording that had to be kept on
yeah,
before being
yeah,
released
yeah,
because I couldn't find time. But
yeah.
it's interesting that you're talking about that, because that it's also part of the grind, right? Sometimes people
Absolutely.
think the grind is always giving up 200% every day.
Yeah,
There will be days where you'll be down, there will be days where
yeah,
you'll be up. But what
absolutely.
matters is how consistent you stay and how you keep going forward all the time. I
You
think
see,
that's really
we're back
interesting.
to that.
So for me, I'm
We're
calling
back
it
to that.
balancing. So, but
We're back to that grind. So yeah,
yes, no, but
so
thank you. Yes.
the podcast, which was born in COVID time actually, which
Yes.
is
Hmm.
it's another interesting story for another day. But
Yeah.
podcast was that. So we're actually 5 years this year. So we'll try
Hmm.
and see if we
Amazing.
can do something. So trying to reboot that up again. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find
Okay.
me Brenda Z Kumisuku on
Hmm.
LinkedIn. That's usually my professional uh, sphere or space.
Yes.
Honeypot Chats is on Instagram, and I guess, there's a lot more coming up around that in terms of the reboot. So just, look out there, go and listen to the episodes. Ideally,
Hmm.
the podcast is around trying to simplify cybersecurity for everybody. So
Yes.
the aim was that if my 80-something-year-old father can
Hmm.
actually understand my podcast and know how to keep things safe, then the goal has been achieved.
Yes.
Because in our industry, there tends to be that thing of where jargon, we like to throw jargon around
Yes.
to
Yes.
make it
Yes.
seem scary.
Yes.
So the
Hmm.
the idea behind honeypots was to simplify and have
Yes.
everybody be able to do that. Toying with other ideas,
Hmm.
hopefully.
Hmm. Hmm.
Maybe potentially adding author to my name at some point in time. I don't know. It's
Okay.
been something that's been on my heart for a while.
Uh-huh.
So we'll see how that goes.
Hmm.
Yeah, and pretty much, yeah, I think if you just Google my name, Bing it,
Hmm.
so that,
Hmm.
we use Google and Bing.
Yes.
If you
Thank you for
Google
mentioning the
Bing,
being part.
hey, I'm an
Yes.
alumni of Microsoft. I need to, push it as well.
Amazing.
So
Yes.
Google Bing, and then, Brenda K. Kumisuko, you should find something there. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brenda. Everyone, that was Brenda Z. Kumisuku, chat podcast co host, aiming to simplify cybersecurity for the public. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.